The gym smells exactly as I remembered it would. Floor wax and something synthetic, maybe the remnants of decades of teenage sweat absorbed into the walls. They have tried to transform it with fairy lights strung across the basketball hoops and silver streamers that catch the overhead fluorescence. But it is still unmistakably the same place where I spent 4 years learning to hide. I stand at the edge of the room with my hands buried deep in my pockets, watching couples I barely recognize sway beneath the makeshift canopy of lights. The music is too loud and too familiar, pulling at memories I have spent 20 years trying to file away. Someone has set up a punch bowl on a folding table covered with the same maroon and gold tablecloth they used for every school dance, and the sight of it makes my chest tighten in a way I cannot explain. There are faces I know, or think I know, aged and softened by time and distance. They move through the space with the careful confidence of people performing their own past, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that probably were not that funny the first time. I recognize the gestures more than the features. The way Sandra still touches her hair when she talks. The way Mike still stands with his shoulders hunched forward, as if he is perpetually bracing for impact. I have been divorced for 3 years, though I doubt anyone here knows that. The absence of my wedding ring feels conspicuous, like a missing tooth I keep prodding with my tongue. Clara and I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning in November, sitting across from each other at a conference table that smelled like bitter coffee and regret. We were polite about it. We have always been polite about everything. The DJ, who looks barely old enough to remember our graduation, announces something about taking us back to the golden days. His voice crackles through speakers that have seen better decades, and I wonder if he has any idea what those golden days actually felt like for some of us. If he knows that nostalgia can be a kind of violence. That is when I see him. Julian stands near the far wall, surrounded by a small cluster of people I vaguely remember from student government and drama club. He is laughing at something someone has said, his head tilted back in a way that makes the light catch the silver that now threads through his dark hair. 20 years have passed since I last saw him this close, and yet my body recognizes him immediately, the way you recognize a scar by the way it pulls. He looks different, of course. Older. The sharp angles of his face have softened, and there are lines around his eyes that speak of years I know nothing about. But there is something about the way he holds himself, the easy grace that always made me feel clumsy and sharp-edged by comparison. Something that makes my throat close and my pulse quicken, as if no time has passed at all. I force myself to look away, to focus on anything else. The banner stretched across the stage that reads "Welcome back, class of 2005" in letters that are trying too hard to be celebratory. The photographer moving through the crowd, capturing moments that will be forgotten as soon as they are posted. The couples on the dance floor, moving to a song that was popular when we were 17 and thought we knew everything about heartbreak. But my eyes drift back to him, and I find myself cataloging the changes like evidence in a case I will never solve. The way he moves his hands when he talks. The way he still favors his left foot, probably from the soccer injury that ended his scholarship dreams. The absence of a wedding ring that I notice because I am looking for it, because some part of me needs to know. The music shifts, something slower and more deliberate, and the DJ announces that this next song is dedicated to all the couples who shared their first dance right here in this very gym. A special moment for those who found love in these halls and have carried it into their beautiful lives together. My stomach drops. I remember our prom, the one that feels like it happened in another lifetime to people we no longer are. I remember the weight of the silence that stretched between us that night, thick and suffocating and full of things we could not say. I remember the fight in the hallway afterward, sharp words meant to cut, meant to push away what felt too dangerous to hold. I start to move toward the exit, ready to disappear into the parking lot and drive home to my quiet house with its empty rooms and careful solitude. But something makes me stop. Some instinct or impulse that feels older than thought. I turn, and Julian is looking directly at me. The distance between us collapses into nothing. 20 years, 20 feet, 20 reasons why this is a mistake. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes hold mine with an intensity that makes my breath catch. The music continues around us, couples finding each other on the dance floor. But the world has narrowed to this moment, this recognition, this terrifying sense of something unfinished finally demanding to be seen. He does not smile. Neither do I. We simply stand there, separated by a gymnasium full of ghosts and memories, acknowledging each other across a divide that suddenly feels both infinite and paper-thin. 3 weeks before the reunion, I sit in my office on the 7th floor of a building that smells like industrial carpet and stale coffee. The nameplate on my desk reads Nathaniel Cross, Senior Claims Adjuster, and below it sits a stack of files detailing other people's disasters. Water damage, hailstorms, house fires that consumed family photographs, and wedding dresses and children's drawings stuck to refrigerator doors with magnets shaped like fruit. I have been processing loss for 15 years, quantifying the dollar value of what cannot be replaced. It is steady work, predictable in its rhythm of phone calls and paperwork and careful documentation. I drive to suburbs that look exactly like my own, take photographs of damaged roofs and flooded basements, and write reports that reduce entire lifetimes to line items on claim forms. My house sits on Maple Street in a neighborhood where every lawn is maintained to the same height, and every mailbox is painted the same shade of forest green. It is a good house, a sensible house, with 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms and a kitchen island that Clara picked out because she said it would be perfect for entertaining. We never entertained. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday. Clara packed her books and her coffee mugs and the framed photographs of us pretending to be happy at various family gatherings. She left behind the couch we bought together and the dining room table we never used and the silence that had grown between us like a third presence in our marriage. She lives across town now in an apartment with better light and plants that she actually remembers to water. Our daughter Evelyn spends weekends with me, filling the empty rooms with her laughter and her music and her endless questions about everything except the thing she senses but cannot name. She is 16, sharp and funny and beautiful in a way that sometimes takes my breath away. She has Clara's eyes and my stubborn chin and a way of looking at me that makes me feel transparent. Last weekend, she found a shoebox in my closet filled with old photographs and yearbooks. She sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, flipping through pages of faces she did not recognize, asking me to tell her stories about people I had not thought about in years. She lingered on a photograph from senior year, our debate team posed stiffly in front of the school trophy case. There I am in the back row, 17 and angular, and trying too hard to look serious. And there, 2 people over, is Julian. Even in a grainy yearbook photo, he commands attention. Captain of the soccer team, president of student council, the boy who seemed to move through the world with an ease I could never replicate. She asked me if we were friends. I told her we were classmates. She studied the photograph for a long moment, and I wondered what she saw there that I had spent decades trying not to see. The way my eyes find him even in a group shot. The careful distance I maintained even when the photographer told us to move closer together. Our rivalry was legendary, the kind that teachers and parents found amusing because it pushed us both to excel. Every grade, every award, every small victory became a battlefield. When he scored the winning goal in the homecoming game, I won the debate tournament the following week. When I was named valedictorian, he was voted most likely to succeed. We measured ourselves against each other with the precision of scientists, cataloging wins and losses like they mattered more than anything else in the world. But underneath the competition was something else, something I could not name then and barely allow myself to acknowledge now. The way my pulse quickened when he walked into a room. The way I memorized the sound of his laugh, so I could recognize it from down the hallway. The way I crafted my arguments in debate class not just to win, but to make him notice me, to earn some flicker of respect or recognition or something I could not define. I told myself it was hatred. It was easier that way. Safer. Hatred was an emotion I could understand, could justify, could build a wall around. Whatever else it might have been felt too dangerous to examine, too foreign to my understanding of who I was supposed to be. Now I come home each evening to rooms that echo with the absence of voices. I heat frozen dinners in the microwave and eat them standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at a backyard where nothing grows except the grass I pay someone else to cut. I watch television shows I do not really care about and go to bed at the same time every night, setting my alarm for the same time every morning. It is a life of careful routines and measured distances. A life that looks complete from the outside, stable and respectable and unremarkable. But lying awake in the dark, I feel the weight of all the things I have never said, all the questions I have never asked, all the truths I have buried so deep I sometimes forget they are there at all. The reunion invitation arrived on a Thursday, mixed in with the utility bills and grocery store circulars. I read it once and set it aside, already deciding not to go. But Evelyn found it the next weekend, reading the gold script aloud with the kind of excitement only teenagers can muster for other people's nostalgia. She said I should go, that it would be fun to see old friends again, to remember what it was like to be young. I did not tell her that some memories are too sharp to hold comfortably, that some people become ghosts for good reasons, that I have spent 20 years building a life designed specifically to avoid the kind of moments that force you to confront who you really are beneath all the careful pretending. The reunion invitation sits on my kitchen counter for 6 days, accumulating coffee ring stains and the guilt that comes from avoiding decisions. Every morning I see it there, golden script announcing 20 years of progress and achievement and the promise of rekindling old friendships. Every morning I consider throwing it away. Evelyn finds me staring at it on a Saturday afternoon when she is supposed to be doing homework, but is instead rummaging through my refrigerator in search of something that is not leftover Chinese takeout. She picks up the invitation and reads it aloud, her voice taking on the theatrical tone she uses when she wants to make a point. She tells me I am being ridiculous. She says that normal people go to their high school reunions, that it will be good for me to get out of the house and remember what it was like to have a social life. She asks if I am planning to become one of those divorced dads who only leaves the house for work and grocery shopping. I tell her that some chapters are better left closed. She rolls her eyes in the way that only 16-year-olds can master and informs me that I am not nearly old enough to be this much of a hermit. Before I can argue, she has filled out the RSVP card in my handwriting and announced that she will mail it herself if I do not. The weeks that follow feel different, charged with an anticipation I cannot shake. I find myself taking longer routes home from work, driving past the old high school that now sits empty and scheduled for demolition. The building looks smaller than I remember, tired and worn, its brick facade marked by decades of weather and neglect. But standing in the parking lot, I can still see us as we were, 17 and 18 and convinced that everything mattered more than it probably did. I start walking at night, something I have not done since the divorce when sleep became elusive and the walls of my house felt too close. The neighborhood is quiet after dark, porch lights casting pools of yellow on sidewalks where children have drawn chalk hopscotch courts that will be washed away by the next rain. I walk for miles, letting my feet carry me through streets that all look the same, trying to outpace memories that seem determined to surface. I remember the prom, our final confrontation after years of careful antagonism. The theme was under the stars, and they had covered the gymnasium ceiling with dark paper and tiny white lights that were supposed to look like constellations, but mostly just looked sad. I wore a rented tuxedo that was too long in the arms, and had spent the entire evening watching Julian dance with Sarah Peterson, whose father owned the largest car dealership in town. The fight happened in the hallway outside the boys' bathroom, away from the music and the cameras and the teachers chaperoning with tired smiles. I had cornered him there, 3 drinks deep on punch that someone had spiked with vodka, my anger finally too large to contain. I said things I had been storing up for years, called him golden boy and teacher's pet, and told him that everything came too easy for him, that he had never earned anything he had been given. He stood there and took it, his bow tie crooked and his hair mussed from dancing, until I ran out of words and stood there breathing hard in the fluorescent light. Then he asked me, quietly, why I hated him so much, what he had ever done to make me despise him the way I so clearly did. I could not answer him, could not explain that hate was not the right word, that what I felt was too complicated and too frightening to have a name. Could not tell him that I spent half my time trying not to notice the way he moved through the world and the other half cataloging every detail. Could not admit that my anger was really fear of something I could not even acknowledge to myself. So I said nothing, turned around and walked away, leaving him standing there under lights that made everything look harsh and unforgiving. We did not speak again until graduation, and even then it was only to shake hands in the receiving line, a gesture that lasted 3 seconds and felt like holding fire. The night of the reunion arrives with unseasonable warmth and the kind of humid air that makes everything feel weighted and slow. I stand in front of my bedroom mirror for 20 minutes, buttoning and unbuttoning the same shirt, changing ties twice, combing my hair until it lies flat against my skull. My hands are shaking, which seems ridiculous for a man of 41 preparing to see people he barely remembers from a life he barely recognizes. I almost do not go. I sit in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes with the engine running, the radio playing songs that were popular when we were young. I could drive to a movie instead, or a bookstore, or anywhere that does not require me to pretend that the past 20 years have been everything I hoped they would be when I walked across that graduation stage. But something pulls me forward, some gravitational force I cannot name or resist. I drive through streets that look different in the dark, past houses where people are settling into their Saturday evening routines, toward a building that holds every version of myself I have tried to leave behind. The parking lot is fuller than I expected, filled with cars that look like they belong to responsible adults with mortgages and retirement accounts, and children who call them mom and dad. I sit in my car for another moment, watching people walk toward the entrance in groups of 2 and 3, laughing and adjusting their clothes and looking like they belong exactly where they are. When I finally walk through the doors, the transformation takes my breath away. They have managed to turn our old gymnasium into something that almost looks elegant, with fabric draped across the walls and lights that cast everything in a warm, forgiving glow. It looks nothing like the place where I spent 4 years learning to hide, and yet it feels exactly the same. I stand at the threshold, taking it all in, when I see him across the room. Julian, 20 years older and somehow more himself than ever, surrounded by people who seem drawn to him like moths to flame. The sight of him hits me like a physical blow, unexpected and devastating and completely inevitable. The ground tilts beneath my feet, and I realize that all my careful preparation, all my walls and defenses and practiced indifference, are completely useless. Some things, it seems, time cannot touch. Julian sees me before I can retreat into the safety of anonymity. Our eyes meet across the transformed gymnasium, and 20 years collapse into nothing. The old electricity returns immediately, that same charged tension that used to make every room feel too small, every conversation feel like a carefully orchestrated battle. But now there is something else threaded through it, something softer and more dangerous. He excuses himself from his circle of admirers and walks toward me with that same easy confidence I remember, though now it carries the weight of decades I know nothing about. His smile is cautious, questioning, as if he is trying to solve a puzzle he thought he had forgotten. He says my name like he is testing how it sounds after all these years. I respond with his, and the familiarity of it in my mouth feels like coming home and running away at the same time. We stand there for a moment, 2 middle-aged men in a high school gymnasium, carrying the ghosts of who we used to be. Our first exchange is stilted, edged with the same sarcasm that used to define us. He comments on how the place looks different, and I tell him it is still the same building where we spent 4 years pretending to know what we were doing. He laughs, and the sound cuts through me like it always did, unexpected and warm and completely disarming. But beneath the familiar rhythms of our old antagonism, something else moves like a current underwater. When he asks how I have been, the question carries real weight, genuine curiosity rather than polite obligation. When I deflect with a joke about insurance adjusting being the glamorous career path I always dreamed of, he does not laugh. Instead, he looks at me with something that might be concern, or recognition, or both. The evening unfolds in a strange dance of approach and retreat. We drift toward each other throughout the night, drawn by forces neither of us acknowledges aloud. I find myself standing near him during the slideshow of old photographs, both of us wincing at images of our teenage selves. He gravitates toward me during the memorial moment for classmates who are no longer with us, and I feel the heat of his presence beside me like a fever. We make small talk with other people, exchange pleasantries and updates about careers and children and the careful markers of successful adult lives. But always, we circle back to each other, as if we are the only two people in the room who remember what it felt like to be 17 and angry and burning with feelings we could not name. During a lull in the music, while couples pose for photographs and small groups cluster around tables covered with memorabilia, Julian leans closer to me and admits that he almost did not come tonight. His voice carries the same vulnerability I remember from that night in the hallway, when he asked me why I hated him and I could not find words for the truth. I tell him I almost stayed home too. We share a look that holds years of regret and recognition, and I notice again the absence of a wedding ring on his finger. The observation feels significant, like a door opening that I thought had been permanently sealed. Someone mentions Mrs. Henderson, our old chemistry teacher who terrorized us with pop quizzes and made us memorize the periodic table. We both start laughing at the same time, remembering how she used to call on Julian whenever he was obviously not paying attention, and how he would somehow always know the answer anyway. The laughter feels good, natural, like finding a piece of ourselves we thought we had lost. As the night grows later and the crowd begins to thin, Julian suggests we step outside for some air. The music follows us faintly as we push through the doors into the parking lot, where the night air carries the smell of late summer and distant rain. The string lights from inside cast geometric patterns through the windows, and we find ourselves sitting on the concrete steps where we used to eat lunch when the cafeteria felt too crowded or too loud. Out here, away from the performance of reunion cheerfulness, the conversation shifts into something more honest. Julian tells me about the job that never quite became the career he thought he wanted, about the apartment downtown where he lives alone and reads mystery novels until late at night. His voice carries a resignation that I recognize, the sound of someone who has made peace with a life that looks different than what they planned. I find myself telling him about Clara, about the careful dissolution of a marriage that was built on kindness and compatibility but never quite caught fire. I tell him about Evelyn, about how she fills my weekends with her energy and her questions and her unconscious way of seeing through all the walls I have built. I do not tell him about the nights I lie awake wondering what my life would look like if I had been brave enough to be honest 20 years ago. He listens without judgment, nodding in the right places, asking questions that show he is really hearing me rather than just waiting for his turn to speak. When I finish, the silence between us feels different than it used to. Heavier, charged with electricity that makes the air feel thick and hard to breathe. In the glow of the parking lot lights, I see him clearly for the first time tonight. Not the golden boy I used to envy, not the rival who defined so much of my adolescent identity, but a man, tired in places, marked by years of disappointments and small victories and the kind of ordinary struggles that shape us all. The lines around his eyes speak of laughter and worry in equal measure. His hair, silver-threaded now, falls across his forehead in a way that makes me want to reach out and brush it back. He looks beautiful to me in a way that has nothing to do with the perfection I used to resent and everything to do with the imperfections that make him real. Human. Reachable in a way he never was when we were young, and I was too afraid to see him as anything other than everything I thought I could never be. The music from inside shifts to something slower, more romantic, and we both notice it at the same time. Julian glances toward the windows where we can see couples swaying together under the fairy lights, and when he looks back at me, there is something in his expression that makes my chest tighten with recognition and terror. For a moment, sitting on these steps under a sky full of stars we cannot see through the light pollution, I allow myself to imagine what it would feel like to stop running from the truth that has been chasing me for 2 decades. To finally admit what I have spent a lifetime denying, even to myself. The music from inside shifts again, and we both hear the DJ's voice crackling through the speakers as he announces something special. A tribute to prom night, he says, to all the couples who shared their first dance in this very gymnasium. He invites everyone who remembers those magical nights to step onto the floor and relive the romance of their youth. I stand up immediately, my body responding to danger before my mind can catch up. Every instinct tells me to leave, to retreat to the safety of my car and the familiar emptiness of my house. But as I turn toward the parking lot, Julian reaches out and catches my wrist. His touch stops me completely. In 20 years, we have never made contact like this, never crossed the invisible boundary that kept us orbiting each other at a safe distance. His fingers are warm against my skin, and I can feel my pulse hammering against his thumb. For a moment, we stand frozen in the glow of the string lights that leak through the gymnasium windows. He asks, quietly, if I want to go inside. Not to leave, not to escape, but to go back into that transformed space where our teenage selves once circled each other with such careful precision. The question hangs between us like something fragile and dangerous. I should say no. I should pull my wrist free and walk away, preserve the careful distance that has kept me safe for 2 decades. But something in his expression, something vulnerable and hopeful and terrified, makes me nod instead. We walk back through the doors together, and the gymnasium feels different now, charged with possibility and dread in equal measure. The lights seem softer, the music more insistent. Couples have begun to move onto the dance floor, swaying together with the easy intimacy of people who have learned to move as one. I recognize some of them from our class, now 20 years married, 20 years practiced in the art of belonging to each other. Julian leads me toward the edge of the dance floor, and I follow because I cannot think of any reason not to. Because the alternative is to run again, and I am suddenly tired of running from something I have never been brave enough to name. We step onto the polished wood where we once played basketball and attended assemblies and pretended that everything was simpler than it was. At first, our movements are awkward, uncertain. He places one hand on my waist, and I rest mine on his shoulder, and we begin to move in something that barely resembles dancing. We are 2 men trying to remember steps we never learned, navigating territory that feels both foreign and inevitable. But as the music swells around us, something shifts. I stop thinking about who might be watching, stop calculating the risk of this moment. I let myself focus on the solid warmth of Julian's hand against my back, the way he smells like expensive soap, and something else that is purely him. I let myself be present in this impossible moment, dancing with the boy who defined my adolescence in ways I never allowed myself to understand. Our eyes meet, and the careful masks we have worn all evening finally slip away. I see recognition there, and something that looks like relief, as if he has been waiting 20 years for permission to look at me this way. The realization hits me like a physical blow, sudden and devastating, and completely transformative. The truth I have been hiding since I was 17 rises up like water breaking through a dam. My hate was never hate. It was fear. It was desire I could not allow myself to feel, could not even acknowledge existed. Every argument, every competition, every moment of careful antagonism was really about this. About the way his laugh made my chest tight. About the way I memorized the sound of his voice. About the way I built my entire sense of self around the dangerous electricity of being near him. Julian leans closer, his voice barely audible above the music. He tells me that he always wondered, all these years, if what I felt was really hatred or if it was something else entirely. Something more complicated and frightening and true. My throat closes around words I have never spoken aloud. Truths I have spent a lifetime burying so deep I convinced myself they did not exist. My eyes burn with tears I cannot shed here, surrounded by the ghosts of our shared past and the weight of all the years we have lost to fear and silence. I try to speak, to find some way to acknowledge what he is offering me, but the words stick like stones in my chest. This moment feels too large for language, too dangerous for the careful vocabulary I have used to construct a life built on acceptable truths and manageable desires. The song begins to wind down, and I know that in a few moments we will have to step apart, return to the safety of distance and pretense. But right now, moving together in this dim light with his hand warm against my back, I feel something break open inside me that I have kept locked away for decades. I feel terror, yes, but also a strange kind of relief. As if the secret I have carried alone for so long has finally found its way to the surface, demanding to be seen and acknowledged and possibly, impossibly, shared. Julian's eyes search mine, looking for some sign that I understand what he is trying to tell me, that I recognize the question he is asking without words. I want to answer him, want to bridge the gap between us that has existed for so long it has become a kind of geography. But all I can do is stand there, breathing hard, feeling the weight of 20 years of silence pressing down on us both. The music ends, and the spell breaks. Couples around us separate, applauding politely, moving back toward tables and conversations and the safer territory of shared memories that do not require this kind of courage. But Julian and I remain where we are for a moment longer, still touching, still balanced on the edge of something that feels like falling and flying at the same time. When we finally step apart, the absence of his touch feels like losing something I never knew I had. The space between us fills immediately with uncertainty and possibility, and the terrible knowledge that there is no going back from this moment, no returning to the careful ignorance that has protected us both for so long. I need air. The gymnasium suddenly feels suffocating, the fairy lights too bright, the music too loud. The weight of what just happened presses against my chest like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. I push through the crowd toward the exit, not caring who I bump into or what conversations I interrupt. I need space to think, to process what I have just allowed myself to feel. Outside, the night air hits my face like a benediction. I lean against the brick wall beside the entrance, trying to steady my breathing, trying to make sense of the earthquake that has just shifted the foundation of everything I thought I knew about myself. 20 years of careful construction, 20 years of building a life around acceptable truths, and it all crumbles in the space of a single dance. I hear the door open behind me, and I know without turning that it is Julian. Of course it is Julian. He has followed me out here just like he followed me into that moment on the dance floor, offering something I am not sure I am brave enough to accept. He does not say anything at first, just leans against the wall beside me, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his body. We stand there in silence, listening to the distant sound of laughter and music from inside, the hum of traffic from the street, the symphony of ordinary life continuing around us while my world reorganizes itself in ways I cannot yet comprehend. When he finally speaks, his voice is gentle, careful, as if he is approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. He asks if I am okay, and the simple question nearly undoes me, because I am not okay. I have not been okay for 20 years, maybe longer. I have been living a life that fits me like clothes tailored for someone else, and I am only now beginning to understand the cost of that choice. I tell him about Clara, about how I convinced myself that marriage was what I wanted because it was what I was supposed to want. I tell him about the years we spent building a life together based on friendship and mutual respect and the careful absence of passion. How we went through the motions of love without ever quite feeling it. How we created a beautiful facade that fooled everyone, including ourselves for a while. I tell him about the silence that grew between us like something living, feeding on all the things we could not say to each other. How we learned to communicate in gestures and assumptions. How we built a partnership around shared responsibilities rather than shared desires. How even our divorce was polite, civilized, a mutual acknowledgement that we had tried our best with materials that were never quite right for the structure we were attempting to build. Julian listens without interrupting, his presence steady and patient beside me. When I finish, he tells me about his own years of careful choices, of relationships that never quite took root, of a succession of women who were perfectly lovely and perfectly wrong for reasons he could never articulate. He tells me about the apartment where he lives alone, about the career that pays the bills but never quite became the calling he thought he was seeking. He admits that he spent years wondering if there was something fundamentally broken in him, some inability to connect that kept him always at arm's length from the kind of love other people seem to find so naturally. He talks about the therapy sessions where he tried to understand why he kept sabotaging relationships that should have worked, why he always found reasons to pull away just when things started to feel real. And then, so quietly I almost miss it, he tells me that he felt something too, back then. During those years when we circled each other with such careful precision, when our rivalry felt like the most important thing in either of our worlds. He says he recognized something in the way I looked at him, something that mirrored his own confusion and desire and terror. But when I pushed him away that night at prom, when I built walls around myself that were too high for him to scale, he let it go. He convinced himself that whatever he had imagined was one-sided, adolescent confusion rather than something real and worth fighting for. He built a life around that absence, that sense of something missing that he could never quite identify. The night feels heavy around us, thick with humidity and the weight of confessions that have been decades in the making. I can hear my own heartbeat in my ears, can feel the pulse of blood through my veins like a countdown timer marking the moments I have left to choose courage over safety. Julian turns to face me, and in the dim light from the parking lot lamps, I can see the question in his eyes. The same question he asked me 20 years ago in a high school hallway, refined now by experience and loss, and the kind of honesty that only comes with understanding how precious and rare true connection really is. The words rise in my throat like something physical, something that has been trying to escape for so long it has worn grooves in my chest. I think about Evelyn, about the life I have built that looks stable and respectable from the outside. I think about the cost of speaking truth, about the risk of destroying the careful equilibrium I have maintained for so long. But I also think about the weight of silence, about the price I have paid for safety, about the way living a half-truth has made me feel like a ghost in my own life. And I realize that I am 41 years old, and I am tired of being afraid. Tired of building walls around the most important parts of myself. Tired of pretending that the safe choice is always the right choice. So I take a breath that feels like diving off a cliff, and I tell him the truth that has been burning in my chest since I was 17 years old and too scared to understand what it meant. I tell him that I did not hate him, that I never hated him, that what I felt was love, pure and terrifying and impossible to reconcile with everything I thought I knew about who I was supposed to be. I tell him that I spent years trying to transform that love into something more manageable, more acceptable, and that the effort nearly destroyed me. I tell him that I loved him then, and that some part of me has been loving him ever since, carrying that feeling like a secret flame that I could never quite extinguish no matter how hard I tried. That every choice I made was shaped by the absence of him, every relationship measured against a standard I could never acknowledge. The words hang in the night air between us, fragile and devastating and irreversible. I have spoken the truth that I swore I would take to my grave, and there is no taking it back now, no returning to the safety of silence and pretense. Julian's eyes fill with tears that catch the light from the parking lot lamps, and when he reaches for my hand, I do not pull away. We sit in silence after the words have been spoken, after the truth has finally escaped the prison I built for it decades ago. Julian's hand rests next to mine on the concrete step, close enough to touch but not touching, and somehow that small distance feels like the most honest thing either of us has offered tonight. Inside, the reunion is winding down. We can hear the DJ making his final announcements, thanking everyone for coming, reminding people to drive safely and keep in touch. Car doors begin to slam in the parking lot as our former classmates drift back to their real lives, their mortgages and marriages, and all the ordinary complications that wait for them on Monday morning. But we remain where we are, suspended in this moment that feels both monumental and fragile. There is no dramatic embrace, no sudden promise of a future we cannot yet imagine. There is only the knowledge that after 20 years of silence, the most important truth has finally been spoken aloud. The secret that shaped both our lives has been lifted from the shadows and held up to the light. Julian tells me quietly that he is glad I came tonight, that he is glad we found our way to this conversation, even if it took 2 decades and a high school reunion to get here. His voice carries exhaustion and relief in equal measure, and I understand because I feel the same way. Emptied out and somehow lighter, as if I have been carrying a weight I forgot I was holding until it was finally set down. I do not know what comes next. I do not know if this changes anything beyond this moment, beyond the simple fact that we have finally told each other the truth. Maybe that is enough. Maybe some revelations are not meant to transform everything, but simply to exist, to be acknowledged, to free us from the burden of carrying them alone. The parking lot empties slowly around us. Former classmates wave goodbye through car windows, promise to stay in touch in ways they probably will not, disappear into the night, carrying their own secrets and regrets and small victories. The gymnasium lights begin to dim as the cleanup crew arrives, and we know our time here is ending. When I finally stand to leave, Julian remains seated for a moment, looking up at me with an expression I cannot quite read. There is sadness there, but also something that looks like peace. He tells me to take care of myself, and I tell him the same. And somehow those simple words carry more weight than any grand declaration could. I walk to my car alone, but I do not feel alone. The night air feels different on my skin, cleaner somehow, as if speaking the truth has cleared the atmosphere around me. When I reach my car, I turn back once more and see Julian still sitting on the steps, silhouetted against the fading lights of the gymnasium. The image burns itself into my memory like a photograph I will carry for the rest of my life. The drive home passes in a blur of familiar streets and traffic lights. My house waits for me exactly as I left it, unchanged and unchanging, but somehow it feels different when I walk through the door. The silence that usually feels oppressive now feels peaceful, expectant, as if the rooms themselves are waiting to see what I will do with this new knowledge of myself. I move through my evening routine mechanically, brushing my teeth and turning off lights and checking that the doors are locked. But before I go to bed, I find myself drawn to the hall closet where I keep the remnants of my past. I pull out my old yearbook, the one Evelyn discovered weeks ago, and carry it to the kitchen table. I flip through pages filled with faces I barely remember, looking for something I am not sure I will find. And then, tucked between the pages near the back, I discover it. A photograph from prom night, forgotten and faded, but somehow perfectly preserved. It must have been taken before our fight, before the moment that defined the next 20 years of our lives. There I am, awkward in my rented tuxedo, standing with a group of classmates I cannot identify. And there, in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakably present, is Julian. He is half smiling at something outside the frame, his bow tie crooked, his hair catching the light from the gymnasium's disco ball. He looks young and beautiful and completely untouchable, exactly as I remember him. I studied the photograph for a long time, this artifact from a night that changed everything and nothing. Then I close the yearbook gently and leave it on the table, no longer hidden away, but not quite displayed either. Simply present, acknowledged, part of the landscape of my life rather than a secret buried in the dark. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I feel like I can breathe. The truth I have carried alone for so long is no longer mine to bear in isolation. It exists now in the space between Julian and me, witnessed and shared and somehow sacred in its simplicity. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, or next week, or next year. But tonight, I sleep without the weight of secrets pressing down on my chest. Tonight, I am simply a man who told the truth about love, and that feels like enough.